For the longest time, it was believed that in order to be a good Jew, you can't be too happy. A little depressed, perfect. Too happy just doesn't feel Jewish. Maybe it's because of the fact that we haven't been happy for about 2,000 years. Haven't had much to be happy about, maybe. Or is it a religious thing? If you're going to be religious, if you're going to behave yourself, if you're going to avoid sin, you have to be serious. If you're happy, who knows what you're going to do? Or what you already did. What are you so happy about? So it seems like it goes with being religious to be a little bit depressed. And that's why 200 years ago, when the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, when he wrote his first work on Chabad philosophy, he found it necessary to make a strong argument in favor of happiness. And he had to defend it. He had to bring proof from the Torah that it's okay to be happy, or it's necessary to be happy. So let's take a look at what he says in the Tanya, in chapter 26. After describing how we are meant to serve God, given that we have both a positive side to ourselves and a negative side, we have a good inclination, we have an evil inclination, and we have to maintain a balance. That takes 25 chapters. In the 26th chapter, the Rebbe says, but now I got to tell you something really important. The only way you're going to succeed is if you're happy. Because if you're not happy, there is no way that you can come out right. And he uses the analogy of martial arts, hand-to-hand combat. The rule governing martial arts is that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Victory does not go to the one who is strongest. Victory goes to the one who is quickest, agile. The same is true in a moral battle. If you want to win and succeed at being good more often than not, you can't do it with a heavy heart. You can't do it with sluggishness. You have to be upbeat. You have to be light on your feet, which comes from being light in your heart. So it works like this. Worry adds weight to the heart. The heart shuts down. It becomes unresponsive, like a stone. And that creates difficulty in moving, difficulty in thinking. The whole system slows down, shuts down, and you don't have the energy to be good. Because it takes energy to be good. It takes no energy to be lazy. But to do positive, to be positive, you need energy. Sometimes we can't find that energy. The Rebbe defines sadness as a non-emotion. That technically it is not correct to say I feel sad. Because sadness is the absence of emotion. In fact, there are times when we become sad because we want to avoid emotions. Some emotion is waiting. We need to feel either very, very intense pain or very intense joy, and we don't want to. So we shut down and we become sad. So sad means not an emotion, but a lack of emotion, avoidance of emotion, indisposed to emotions. Happiness, then, would be the opposite. You can't really say, I feel happy. Because happy means I am willing to experience emotions. Which emotions? Whatever the situation calls for. Yeah. Right? So a happy person will cry more at a funeral than a sad person. Why? Because he's open to emotions. So if the situation calls for grief, thank you, he will feel grief. If the situation calls for pleasure, enthusiasm, he'll feel that. He is more open to the emotions that life calls for. So happy and sad are not in themselves emotions, but a disposition. Sad means disposed to no emotions. Happiness means disposed to all emotions. Whatever I need to feel, I can feel. So a happy person grieves more deeply than a sad person, and he rejoices more intensely than the sad person. And this is why sadness is unacceptable in Jewish life, because we are meant to pursue holiness, and that which is lifeless is unholy. Sadness is lifeless. Here's the difference between sadness and grief, or regret. When you're sad, all you want to do is sleep. But when you have a deep regret or a grief, then you can't sleep at all. It prevents sleep. You've got too much energy, doesn't let you sleep. Whereas with sadness, you have no energy, and all you want to do is sleep. Can't get out of bed. So sadness is not acceptable because it is not holy, because it is lifeless. And anything that is lifeless has a touch of unholiness to it. But how do we get there? What are the keys to getting rid of sadness and achieving happiness? Now, obviously, happiness doesn't mean that there is nothing wrong in your life. That would be an unrealistic and probably dangerous attitude and approach. Of course, there are things that are wrong. And of course, there are things that need fixing, need attending. But that doesn't make you sad. What really makes us sad is the inability to wrap our heads around what's happening. If I don't understand why, that is depressing. But a difficulty, a challenge, a hardship never depressed anybody. In fact, I think it's true that more people get depressed in affluent societies than in third world countries. Because when you have real problems and you have to put bread on the table, you don't have time to get sad or be depressed. You're busy. You can't afford it. People who can afford to get depressed, go for it. So it's never the problem that depresses. You have two people going through exactly the same crisis. One is depressed and one is not. So it's not the crisis, it's something else. It's some form of tolerance or understanding that makes the difference. So here's an important definition. in addition to the definition of sadness? What is the definition of bad? Did anything bad ever happen to you? Why do bad things happen to good people? How come nobody asks, why do bad things happen to bad people? Huh? No, but if it's bad people, it makes sense. When bad things happen to bad people, it makes sense. Life is good. The world is right. Because bad people should suffer. So when things are happening as they should, we're okay with that. Why does it bother us when bad things happen to good people? Because it shouldn't. It shouldn't. That's what kills us. When something happens to us and we can't understand why and we're convinced that it shouldn't, that's depressing. But anytime we know why the problem exists, we work with it, we fight with it, we wrestle with it, we don't get sad. So let's get this definition. What does the word bad describe? Something painful? Not necessarily. Sometimes pain is fine. Like labor pain. I mean, in childbirth. Not in the workplace. We know what it is, we know what it's for, and in many cases, the woman has been waiting a month for it to start already. So we can't say it's bad, although it is probably one of the more painful things in life. Death is tragic. Is it bad? Not necessarily. If you're 99 and a half, and you've lived a good life, and you're surrounded by your family, and you pass away peacefully in your sleep, everybody's jealous. Of course, you could have waited another half a year, made it to 100. Okay, so you're a shlomazel. But there's nothing terrible. You can't call it bad. But when a child, God forbid, dies, this is bad. Why? It shouldn't happen. So death is not bad. Wrongful death, that's bad. Labor pain is not bad. False labor pain, that's bad. Who needs that? An operation, very painful. But is it bad? No, it's very good. Unless it was supposed to be performed on the other guy. No, then it's bad. So here's our definition. The word bad does not describe what is painful, it doesn't describe what is tragic, it doesn't describe what is sad. Bad means that which happened and it shouldn't have happened. That's bad. So, why do bad things happen to good people? If they happen to bad people, that's what should happen. So it's not bad. The real question is, why do good things happen to bad people? Because that shouldn't happen. Where's the justice? Right? So here's the bottom line. What really saddens and depresses us is not difficulty, not tragedy, not pain. Injustice. We can't stand it. We have some built-in mechanism that demands justice. But if things happen when they are not supposed to, if something can happen when it shouldn't, then life makes no sense. The world is a jungle. I can't live like this. Not so much because of what happened, but because what else is going to happen? There's no rhyme or reason. There's no justice. Well, then we'll know what's next. You can't live like this. We refuse to accept it. For example, people are always asking Elie Wiesel why there was a Holocaust, as if he's supposed to know because he was there. So, of course, most of the time he tells them, why would I know? But one time he said something really insightful and brilliant. Somebody asked him, why was there a Holocaust? He said, I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. The guy said, you know why, but you won't tell me? He says, that's right. He said, why wouldn't you tell me? He says, because if I tell you, you will become a Nazi. The guy says, what are you talking about? I'm Jewish. How would I become a Nazi? And here's his answer. He said, listen to yourself. You're coming to me out of pain. And you're saying, why? It hurts you. It disturbs you. You can't sleep well. How could this happen? Why did this happen? I'm so disturbed by it. Now, I'm going to tell you why it happened. And you're going to say, so that's why. Okay, now I can sleep. See, now you're a Nazi. Are you really asking? You're really asking me to make you comfortable with the Holocaust? Is that what you really want? Of course you don't. When we ask, why was there a Holocaust, we don't want an answer. In fact, how dare you give an answer? No one should ever understand why there's a Holocaust, because then you become a Nazi. So what is it that disturbs us? The why. What kind of a world is this? And if this can happen, what else could happen? That takes our happiness right out the window. If you can't think of life as a positive experience, what is there to be happy about? So here's the secret. If, in fact, bad means something that should not have happened, then nothing bad has ever happened, and nothing bad could possibly happen. Because there's only one God. In order for something to happen that shouldn't happen, you need two gods. The good God and the bad God. You need the God who says this shouldn't happen, and then you need the second God to make it happen, even though it shouldn't. But we don't believe in two gods. We have only one God. And therefore, what should not happen cannot happen. Because who would make it happen? The devil? Can't believe that. So nothing bad has ever happened because this is God's world and He runs the world. And there's no other God hiding behind a rock. So did painful things happen? Absolutely. Tragic things happen? Absolutely. I mean, who knows better than we as a people what tragedy means and what painful means? But did anything bad ever happen? Well, first of all, how am I supposed to know? If bad means it shouldn't have happened, how do I know what should or shouldn't happen? So, of course, when something painful or tragic happens, we ask why. But we should also ask why when something very positive happens. Why do people die? Why are people born? There's a reason. Can we know the reason? Do we know what came before? Do we know what came after? We really don't know. So how could we possibly determine that this should not have happened? That's number one. And number two, if it shouldn't have happened, what made it happen? It just happened by itself? No, I can't live like that. There's something in me that rebels. It can't just happen. Otherwise, life is ridiculous. Huh?
How do we explain Job?
Job? He's a perfect example. Nobody suffered more than Job, and yet he didn't call it bad. That's the whole point of the story. He challenged God, why are you doing this to me? But he never said bad things happened. Now here's the real secret. If I know why something happened, I stop being sensitive and I lose my sympathy and my empathy. For example, if you asked me for advice and I told you not to do it, and you went ahead and you did it, and got yourself into a lot of trouble, and now you're suffering, and you come to me and say, can you help me out? I'm really in trouble. I said, I know. Told you not to do it. Yeah, so can you help me? Help you. I tried to help you. I told you not to do it. See, I'm not sympathetic anymore because I know exactly why it happened. I knew it was going to happen. And as soon as my mind can wrap itself around what happened, it's not a problem anymore, which is terrible. The sages never asked, why do bad things happen to good people? Because bad things don't happen. But painful things do. The sages ask, why do the righteous suffer? It's a different question. If you think it shouldn't have happened, then you're objecting to an injustice. Everybody will object to an injustice. It doesn't take any special sensitivity. Every kid gets upset if it's not fair. It's not fair. He has two. You don't need intelligence. You don't need to be sensitive. You don't need to be special to object to an injustice. What does take some sensitivity? When you realize that it's not an injustice, now how do you feel? It's not an injustice for a woman to be in labor. So, how do you feel? Yeah, let her scream. She's having a baby. Yeah, but it hurts. Yeah, having a baby hurts. Well, what can you do? Well, help her. Do something. Why did you stop being sympathetic just because you understand the reason? So the sages who understood that there's a reason still objected to the pain. That's a little sensitive. You know, there was a time when the Catholic Church would kill midwives. It was part of the Inquisition. And why did they deserve to die? Because the Bible says that you're going to give birth in pain. And they took away the pain. So they're evil. That is so un-Jewish. Yes, the Bible said there'll be pain. Our job is to minimize the pain. The Bible also says there will be poor people, hungry people. Your job, feed them. So we shouldn't lose our sensitivity once we know that bad things don't happen. Painful things happen. And we should object to pain. And we should object to poverty. And we should object to hunger. Even though, who made people hungry? Who made people sick? God. So what are you objecting to? You don't like the way God runs the world? The answer is no. No. We are absolutely sure that He runs the world. We're not happy with it. In fact, He tells us not to be happy with it, to object, to pursue charity and fix things that are not pleasant and helpful to the people, even though there's a reason for it happening. There's a very famous question, which I'm sure you've asked on a number of occasions. We celebrate Pesach. We can't get over it. God took us out of Egypt. He took us out of slavery. We are so grateful. We are so thankful. We can't get over it. 3,000 years later, we're still celebrating Pesach. The obvious question is, you're so grateful that He took you out of Egypt. Who do you think put you in Egypt? He took you out of slavery. Which slavery? The one He decreed that you should suffer from. So, what sense does it make to thank Him? You put us in, you take us out. Why do we thank God when we recover from an illness? Who made us ill? The devil? I think this is a really important mental position. When a country sends its young men out to war, assuming that the king or the president is a Mensch, hypothetical. He sends them out to war because that's what a government needs to do, protect its country, protect its people. But when you bring the troops home, it's a celebration. And you can ask the same question. You're getting so emotional, the troops are coming home. Who do you think sent them out? So what are you celebrating? If you really appreciate them coming home, why'd you send them in the first place? And if you sent them in the first place, something's not right here. But the difference is very real. When the king sends his men into war, it's a strategic thing. It is necessary for the following reasons, and it is a strategic, necessary response to a threat or whatever. When he brings them home, it's not more strategy, that's personal. When you discipline your child, that's a strategy. Necessary, helpful, responsible, not personal. But when the child responds to the discipline and becomes a Mensch, that's personal. That pleasure is personal. Hopefully. So what is it? God sends us into Egypt. It's part of the strategy. You got to go down to lift up the world because you got to lift from the bottom. So you got to experience the lowest part of the world if you're going to make a difference. That's a strategic plan. But when you can finish the job and be free of that obligation, that for God is a personal pleasure. So when He sent us into Egypt, it was a technicality. When He took us out of Egypt, it was personal. And that's why we say in the Haggadah, we are so grateful that you took us out of Egypt, not by sending a messenger, not through an angel, not through a shaliach. You came to take. This was personal. So when we look at things that are painful in the world, it's not bad. It's not something that shouldn't happen. Why should it happen? Some strategic part of the vast eternal plan of turning a lowly world into the highest world. But when something positive happens, that's personal. So when something painful happens, we don't get depressed because it must be necessary. When something positive happens, we celebrate because it's personal. Could it be personal the other way? He is in charge, but sometimes he has to do what it takes, and sometimes he does what he loves. So what does it take to fix the world? You got to get your hands dirty. What does it take to celebrate a fixed world? That's personal. So let me end with this little story. The thing that makes us unhappy is doubts. Doubt drains all your happiness. Uncertainty, when you live with uncertainty, there's no joy. You don't have to strike out in order for there to be no joy in Mudville. If you have doubt that your team is going to win, you already have no joy. The best solution to regaining joy, focus on the things you have no doubts about. It is amazingly effective. Because we live in a world that actually encourages doubts. At the university, you're taught to doubt everything, which is so unhealthy and unnecessary. This guy came to campus with a t-shirt. The t-shirt said, "Question all authority. Independence. Question all authority." So he's walking with this t-shirt down the street on campus, and another student is coming towards him, stops and reads his t-shirt. And he says, "Says who?" What is this? You are obligated and commanded to doubt everybody. Oh, really? Says who? What gives you the authority to tell me what to doubt? It's a silly position. Doubt is a totally unnecessary pain in life. We can go through life without doubt and we would be fine. You're missing nothing. Because most of the time when I say I doubt something, what I really mean is, I have no idea. Ask me if there's life on Mars. Oh, I doubt it. No, I don't doubt it. I know absolutely nothing about it, and of that I am sure. I don't doubt. I'm absolutely certain that I have no idea. And that's usually the case. When I say doubt, I don't really mean doubt. It just sounds more sophisticated than to say, I don't know. So, get rid of doubts. How do you do that? Wake up in the morning and focus on the things you have no doubt about. I know it's becoming a very short list. I used to say, wake up in the morning and focus on the fact that you are a man or a woman. Let's try something else. Because now we have doubts about that too. It is so crazy. Focus on the things you have no doubts about. I had a woman in our program, the Beis Chana program, years ago, back in the 80s. Everything I said, she said, well, you can't be sure. No matter what I said, it was like, you don't know that for sure. Maybe not. said, who did this to you? Do you like what I'm saying or not? What is this maybe? So finally I said to her, stop it already. Maybe. Maybe your mother's not your mother. You were switched in the hospital. She says, oh my God. I said, whoa, I didn't mean to add another doubt in your life. Focus on the things you know for sure at the beginning of your day, and then do it again at the end of your day. Because the middle of the day, there are so many doubts. You can't live with that. Start your day on what you know for sure. Like you wake up in the morning and you say, I have my soul back. I didn't do that. I'm sure. I'm sure I didn't do that. So, thank God, I have another day. And at the end of the day, focus on what you know for sure. What was absolutely right and what was absolutely wrong that you're not going to do again. Don't go to sleep with doubts. It brings your joy back. As the Gemara says, there's no greater joy than the resolution of doubt. So let me share with you a story, personal experience. I go into New York often. I live in Minnesota. Come into New York often. I have family, the Rebbe. I come in, this is back in the 80s, and the office where the Rebbe's files are kept was being moved or changed, and they were moving the furniture. There was a storage room that they were going to turn into an office. So I helped out, and I'm wheeling this file cabinet on a two-wheeler, and a manila folder slips out. We pick it up. It has one letter in it, single letter, on stationery from a doctor in Manhattan. Now, the way the Rebbe answered his correspondence, hundreds of letters a day, is by writing his response on the letter that you sent. In the margins and on the bottoms, he would write his answer immediately, and then the secretary would type it up, and it would be a letter. But when the Rebbe wrote his answer, it was brief points, bullet points, A, B, C, D. We picked up this letter, and the Rebbe's answer was written in the margins. And here's what it was about. This doctor writes to the Rebbe, my friend and I decided to have a new Torah written. So we hired a scribe, and before you finish the last line, you make a big party, and you honor certain people to fill in the last letters, and then there's a chuppah, like a wedding canopy, and you carry the new Torah to the old Torahs, and the old Torahs are brought out to greet the new Torah. It's a beautiful ceremony and so on. And they decided to have the ceremony in Manhattan in the doctor's apartment. It's a very large apartment. One of the people they invited to this party was a young woman who at the party suffered an aneurysm, and before the ambulance got there, she had passed away. This doctor is now writing to the Rebbe, asking, what should I tell the people who are asking me to explain this? He says, my faith is fine, I'm okay. But there are people, particularly students, who are asking me, how can this happen? A woman comes to a holy event, the completion of a Sefer Torah, and dies? So you know when a person says, I have no problem, but my friend is asking, you get a little suspicious. Some guy once came to a Rebbe in Russia and said, Rebbe, my friend wants to know, how do you do chuva for committing adultery? So the Rebbe said, why didn't your friend come and ask himself? He said, well, obviously he's embarrassed. So the Rebbe said, he doesn't have to be embarrassed. He can come here and say that he has a friend who wants to know. So the guy admitted that it was him. The doctor gives himself away because his second question is, why did this happen in my apartment? He's all freaked out. Anyway, so here's the Rebbe's answer. There were 5 of us working there, and we sat down to read the answer, blown away. Here's the Rebbe's answer. Point number 1. Why do human beings think they can figure out God's thinking? Number 2. The Torah tells us that we should try to understand God's thinking. So let's try. Number 3. Every person, when they're born, is given a certain amount of time. The angel announces exactly when the person is going to die. To the minute. Most people, with very, very few exceptions, live out the life that they're given at birth. You have to do something really unthinkably heinous to shorten your life. I mean, after all, it's the angel announcing. He's not guessing. And you have to do something really magnificent to extend your life past the announced date. People pass away on the time that they were given. Point number 4. When the time comes, the circumstances in which it happens is very meaningful. For example, a person far away from home, where nobody knows him and he passes away that's not so good. Home, surrounded by your family, people who care, much better. There was an old chassid from Israel who came to 770. He came to New York for Yontif. He was a special guy, and they honored him to open the ark for Kol Nidre. He was halfway to the ark, and he collapsed and died right there. He was in his 80s, and all of his colleagues, all of his peers were thinking, how did he do that? I mean, on Yom Kippur, in 770, in the presence of our entire congregation, on his way to the ark for, wow. I mean, you got to do something special. They were jealous. A few years later, another man died in 770. Don't get the impression that it's a dangerous place. But he died on Simchas Torah, in middle of the dancing. And all the old guys there said, oh, that's even better. You danced your way right into heaven. You know, when you get to heaven, they ask you where you're coming from. Could be embarrassing. Was it this very Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox guy decided that he wants to see what the other side lives, how they live. Shaves off his payas, shaves off his beard, takes off his tzitzis, takes off his yarmulke, goes to a nightclub. He comes out of the nightclub, he's trying to cross the street, he gets hit by a truck, and he dies. He comes to heaven, and he says to God, come on, I've been good all my life. One night I misbehave, you have to kill me? And God says, Mendel, I didn't recognize you. So when they ask you, where are you coming from? It doesn't matter what you did all your life. Just now, where were you? It can be embarrassing, or could be pretty good. Where was I? I was dancing on Simchas Torah, and my heart just gave out. Or I was on Yom Kippur, and I was in the shul, and I was... So it makes a huge difference. In fact, when a person is breathing his last breaths, every detail becomes magnified, as we can imagine, or can't imagine. So the Rebbe says in the letter, can you imagine how meaningful it was for this girl who could not in her last moments, say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because she had an aneurysm. But she knew that the room in which she is dying has a mezuzah on the door, and the mezuzah says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So she knew that she was dying in a room surrounded by good people and doctors who tried to help her. There was a mezuzah on the door that said Shema Yisrael, and her life was completing together with a Torah. So what should you tell your friends and your students? Tell them that they just saw a magnificent expression of divine providence. And in fact, according to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, why did you decide to write a Torah in the first place? For her. This was her merit. Anyway, we sat there looking at this letter, and we couldn't believe. Why don't we see things straight? Why do we always have this negative assumption? See that? She went to a party celebrating a Torah, and it killed her. No, it didn't kill her. Why do we think so negative? So we're sitting there marveling. And by the way, the Rebbe said, concerning your second question, why did it happen in your apartment? Because you're a doctor. And your job is to either heal people when you can or comfort them when they're dying. Usually you do it in the hospital, but this time it happened in your apartment because you're a doctor. Don't freak out. So we're sitting there marveling at this. The phone rings. The story's not over. There's a rabbi on the other line. He's panicked. He's in the middle of a bar mitzvah for his son. He's got hundreds of guests at the party. And his father, the boy's grandfather, had come in from out of town and was getting up to speak. And he had a heart attack and died at the bar mitzvah. And this man is panicked. He says, I don't know what to do. Ask the Rebbe, please. What should I call off the bar mitzvah? Send everybody home? What do I do? We said, you got a pen? Take this down. And we read the letter to him. And he went and read it to the entire community at this bar mitzvah. And people walked away amazed and inspired. Now we're sitting there thinking, can you believe this? The letter falls out. It's 10 years old, or 15 years old, the letter. It falls out just in time for us to convey it to this man who needed to know. Isn't that amazing? Divine providence. And then we looked at each other and was like, who decided to move furniture all of a sudden? And I can tell you that to this day, that room never became an office. After that day, the interest in changing the room, I don't know, nobody really changed it. It was all for that letter to fall out so that we... If you have any doubts, remind yourself that nothing moves, nothing shakes, nothing changes unless there's a reason. And that's even little things. The Gemara says, there is no blade of grass that doesn't have an angel appointed to it that beats it and says, grow. Otherwise it wouldn't grow. So nothing happens automatically, nothing happens purposelessly, certainly nothing happens accidentally. Everything that happens because there's a reason. And it's the reason that makes it happen. Without that reason, it couldn't happen. If we can be reassured that no matter how painful, and no matter how tragic, and no matter how angry we are about what's happened, it's meant to happen. No doubts. So we have no doubt that it's meant to happen, and we have no doubt that we don't like it, that we object to it. And that's why we ask God to stop, fix it, heal the sick, feed the poor. And we do whatever we can to heal the sick and feed the poor. So here's the key to happiness. It's not a Band-Aid, it's the real thing. Doubt makes you unhappy. Unhappy means you have no energy for any emotions, except maybe anger. It's interesting, when a person is depressed, the only emotion you can get them to feel is anger. If we could get rid of the doubts, if we could focus on what we know for sure, we would be much happier people. And the final thought is, prisoners of war, soldiers are trained that if they're taken prisoner, to maintain their sanity and not become victim of interrogation techniques and so on, you know what I'm talking about. Repeat your name, your rank, and your serial number. No matter what they ask you, you give them your name, your rank, and your serial number. Because that you're sure of. They can't play with your head. But if they start asking you, what do you think of this, think of it, they're going to make you crazy. They're going to introduce doubts. You're going to confess things that you're not even guilty of. They've got you. To maintain your sanity, name, rank, serial number. Name, rank, serial number. And that's what we do in the morning. Thank God that I'm a Jew, I am male or female, and I have mitzvahs to perform. Everything else, I don't know. But this I know. I'm a Jew, I'm a Jewish man or a Jewish woman, and I've got mitzvahs to perform. So we should all be blessed with a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, and a lot of anger at the things that are painful, that are tragic, that we object to, until the whole world becomes what it is meant to be, more godly, more holy than heaven, more divine, no suffering, no pain, because it only happens to serve a purpose. Once it has served its purpose, it's gone forever. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? You know, I do a lot of talking, a lot of Zooming, many classes, many subjects, but that's all formal stuff. Hopefully good stuff, but formal. We also have a Wednesday night meeting that's more informal and kind of Hamish. If you want to join us for that kind of an event, interactive, time for questions and so on, if you want to join us for this side of conversation, click on the link below and join us every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Well, maybe not every Wednesday night, but we try to make it every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, a more informal chat, which can be more enjoyable at times than the formal stuff. So check it out. Click on the link and join us. Try it, you'll like it.